time we are on 5.5 technology in the industrial age. And so we're going to jump right in here, start with the coal revolution. Coal is the driving force of the industrial revolution, right? Especially with the creation of steam power, right? The steam engine, as a matter of fact, kind of being the most major of those early revolutionary and early industrial revolution inventions by James Watt. Okay, and so this turned coal into steam, right? You burned the coal with some water. Water created steam, and that created the steam engine, right? And so that's a huge deal. And so we even see this used for steam-powered trains pretty quickly. They become pretty much the major way trains are generate energy, but also for just factories as well, right? Textile machinery as well is what it's used for originally. Okay. And then on top of this, we also have a big change in water transportation. So, for as long as humans have been sailing, pretty much it's been use of sails, right? But now what we have is the use of the coal power steam engine allows for ships to do things they've never done before, right? Which is go upriver, right? And they can be turned on and off, right? And so we no longer see a dependency on the winds. Oops, excuse me. A dependency on the winds, right? And instead, we are simply able to go upriver, right? We can go upstream, upriver, as much as 5 miles an hour, which was faster than sailing was for the most part, right? And so what we see then created here, or colonially speaking, to help make sure that steamships could get their way around the world, is the advent of the coaling station, right? Which were created at critical points along trade routes. And the one they point out here in particular is the one in Cape Colony, right, which would be Cape Town eventually, as well as the Pacific Ocean Islands, right, which is what actually makes the Pacific Islands viable as colonization efforts, right, is the need to find places to coal steamships going across the Pacific, right? Now, we also see coal allows for the mass production of iron, right? And so because it's allowed, it's an easy source of energy, it's a cheap source of energy, right? And then one of the things that it also helps, create more iron, is the introduction of coke, right? Coke is a more refined form of coal that kind of gets rid of the purities, right? And that creates much stronger iron, known as cast iron, right? Which was it was hard to kind of stretch and shape. It's very strong, but once if you hit it in a certain place, right, it'll break much easier than typical iron. And then we have the less strong but more workable wrought iron created by Henry Cort, which is much more bendable and much more flexible, but harder to, or less strong than, of course, cast iron was, right? Okay. So those are the innovations in the iron industry, but steel is coming along the way, and that's actually what we're going to talk about here in the second industrial revolution. So I think a lot of students tend to only recognize the first industrial revolution, but there are actually two industrial revolutions, one coming at the end of the 19th century, right, late 19th, early 20th century, is the second industrial revolution, right? So whereas the first focuses on textiles, steam power, and iron, the second focuses on steel, the innovative use of chemicals, precision machinery, right? So more precise machinery instead of the kind of big, broad machines, and of course, possibly the most important, electronics and electricity, right? So the mass production of steel becomes possible with the use of the Bessemer process, which was created in 1856. The Bessemer process uses these what are called blast furnaces, right? And it blasts this molten metal with air to kind of remove impurities and keep the metal from solidifying, right? Um, right, creating these massive blast furnaces that kind of shake back and forth to bring air into the system, right? So that's a major development in steel. It makes steel become the backbone, the literal backbone of any industrial society. Okay. In the mid 1800s, we also see the introduction of oil, right? And so we start to see kerosene as the early use, right? But what we really want to focus on with oil is the advent of precision machinery, right? Because oil was a little better for those kind of things than coal, right? And of course, probably the more important to this day, maybe not more important, they're both important. The internal combustion engine, right? So with the steam engine, right, you had kind of this, you had this much bigger machine that was not necessarily very easy to put into small vehicles or small machines, right? But with oil, right, you didn't necessarily need all the machinations that a steam engine did, right? And so, right, with the internal combustion engine, we're also going to see the invention of automobiles in the early 1900s. Okay, electricity is invented, right? Um, and this has to wait for an electric generator, right? And yeah, so we see it's invented, and they don't really talk too much. They talk about street lighting and electric street trains in the 1890s, but let's just say developed in London in 1882. Okay. Um, we also have developments in communications due to electricity, right? And so we have the telephone created by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, right? Thomas Edison will refine that voice transmitter. And then, so the telephone is Alexander Graham Bell. And then we also have the advent of radio by Guglielmo Marconi, an Italian, um, uh, who was able to send radio signals across the Atlantic Ocean, right? And so it was originally used for communication more than anything, but eventually, of course, be used for kind of mass media that has a bigger impact than newspapers ever did, and will eventually be surpassed by television, but it will play a major role in the early 20th century, as in mid 20th century, as a way to kind of create mass media, right? So we start to see a more. They didn't talk about this, but there's also a telegraph. They didn't talk about this section. They talked about the next section. But the telegraph also creates instantaneous communication, right? So we start to see a more connected world than ever before. Not just because of we had the trade routes of the last era that connected the Americas to Afro-Eurasia, right? But now we have railroads. Now we have steamships. Now we have the telephone, and now we have the telegraph as well, right? Makes a much more connected world. Allows for the things that the Europeans have been doing, the exploration and colonization, more possible, right? They talked about the transcontinental railroad in the United States, really connecting the country for the first time, and also really helping develop uh, large industrial sectors, right? And also help bring together all the natural resources that the United States had, right? Um, let's see what else we want to talk about here. We also see a big development in the desire for capital, right? But I'm not going to focus too much on that. Um, yeah, I think the key thing here is an increase in trade and migration due to these developments of the first and second industrial revolutions, right? They kind of talk about the need for capital, which really that allowed for the entrepreneurship, right? The industrialization, right? The desire for more money, right? Um, but yeah, I think that's going to do it for this section. A lot of key developments: steam engine, of course, the developments in iron, but then probably more importantly, the oil with precision machinery, is internal combustion engine, electricity, communications technologies, and the steel Bessemer process, right? But that's going to do it for today. Pretty quick, pretty easy, I would say. Next time, we'll talk about the role of the government in industrialization. But until then, I'll see you.